Studies here at the Center, and it will be my pleasant job to moderate this morning's program on connecting Muslim communities and governments in the United States and Europe, specifically the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, and the German Information Center USA of the German Embassy for making this program possible. I should say that this program is, in a sense, a follow-up to a workshop that has been held at the Center over the last day, in which we brought together from each of the four countries Muslim community leaders and government officials to really talk with each other about what the problems are in connecting Muslim communities with governments, what best practices are, how to deal with the problems, and generally have a conversation that affects government officials and Muslim communities and the rest of the communities in all four of those countries. It's been an exciting discussion, and we're very glad that you are here to hear at least a little bit of what went on yesterday and the evening before. I would also like to mention somebody who can't be with us here this morning, Jonathan Lawrence, Professor Jonathan Lawrence of Boston College, who is the co-organizer of this program, who has a terrible case of flu, who soldiered on yesterday in spite of that, and who was confined to his bed this morning. So we will tell him that you missed him. Certainly I missed his being here. This morning we're going to hear from one person from each of the four countries, just talking about what has been done in their countries in this area, what can be done, and then we're looking forward to having your questions and answers and comments or whatever it is that you would like to say. Let me tell you briefly who they are. The people who are sitting here this morning have biographies of each of the speakers, but for those of you who are watching this on the internet, and this is being webcast, and by the way, I should add that it will be archived on the Wilson Center website beginning Monday, www.wilsoncenter.org, for those of you who might like to see it again. For the sake of those people, I'll just say one brief word about each of our speakers. All the way to my right, Mounir Azzaoui is the spokesman for the Green Muslims Green Party and a member of the Working Group on Constitutional Issues of the German Islam Conference. To my immediate right is Bernard Godard, who is an advisor at the Central Office of Religions in the Ministry of the Interior of France. To my left, the Honorable Sue Greenwald, who is the mayor of Davis, California. And next to her, Sajida Madni, who is the organizer of the Birmingham Citizens Organization in England. We're going to start with Mr. Azzaoui.
First, I want to thank the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars for this invitation. In my comments, I will focus on the situation of the Muslim integration in Germany and the problems and some positive developments. I think the workshop yesterday, it became manifest that even the United States, France, Germany, and UK are the big receiving countries of Muslim integration into Western societies. The political and socio-economic context of Muslim integration is different. I think the first difference is the ethnic composition of Muslims. In France, most of the Muslims have North African origins. In Great Britain, South Asian, and in Germany, Turkish background. In the United States, the Muslim population is more diverse and distributed. South Asians, Arabs, Afro-American Muslims are three big groups here in the United States. The second difference is the relation between immigration and Muslim population and the socio-economic background. In Europe, the rate of the Muslim population from the total immigration population is very high. In Europe, you can find something like an identification between immigration and Islam. For most of the people, it is the same. The immigrant, the religious, the socio-economic disprivileged, other all tend to coincide. In the United States, on the other hand, Muslims constitute at most 10% of all new immigrants, with view to the fact that about 30% of all Muslims in the US have an African American background, makes it more difficult to characterize Islam as a foreign, as an un-American religion. At the same time, a big part of the Arab and South Asian community have an academic background and not the socio-economic problems of many Muslims in Europe. I think that there are two big differences inside the European countries, but also in relation to the United States. And the third is the church-state relation. In the United States, you have a separation between state and church. Muslims don't need an official recognition from the state. They build their organizations, they try to have a voice in the public debate and to have an impact on the policy process. In Europe, the state-church relations are different. In France, there is a separation between state and church, which is sometimes very aggressive. In Great Britain, there is a state church. And in Germany, you will find something between both. In a lot of countries, the Muslim organizations need an official recognition from the state in a lot of areas to get real influence or to have the possibility to start work on some issues. In Germany, we have today about 3.2 to 3.5 million Muslims who live in Germany. The number is deduced indirectly from the numbers of the different ethnic groups from countries which have an Islamic majority. There are no exact figures. I think this is also similar to the United States. You have here no exact figures about the Muslim population, but you here have figures between 2 million and 10 million. So we are a little bit more exact in our numbers. So we know it's about 3,500,000. More than 18% of the Muslims in Germany are originally from Turkey. Other main origin countries are Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iran, and Morocco. Most of the Muslims and their ancestors came as guest workers to Germany. I think at all we have to see that Muslims in Western societies have the freedom to practice their religion, with some exceptions. I think the headscarf ban in France is a very popular example where Muslims have not the right to practice their religion. At the same time, we have a lot of discussions going on about Muslim integration. An illustrative example is the mosque building process. In Germany, we have about 2,500 mosques, and about 150 are representative buildings with a minaret and a dome. In the last years, we have the process that a lot of communities leave the mosques in the courtyards and build new representative mosques. This process is on the one side a positive process because it shows that Muslims are part of German society, but on the other hand, it unleashes a lot of fears and prejudices in the society. The new mosque buildings are also a process of adaptation, because not only the cities in Germany are changed, also the architecture of the mosque buildings. So first you have the implantated mosque, a mosque which architecture is bring one-to-one to Germany from Turkey or from an Arab country. Then you have the second process that there is a combination between Western architecture and Muslim architecture. This is the adaptation process. And the third step is the process that we have in future innovative mosques, maybe without minaret and dome. Even this is something which is not imaginable for a lot of Muslims, but I think this will come in future, and you can see that you can see that in some cities, also in some U.S. cities. So this is an example for this integration process of Muslims, and you can find similar processes in the issues of slaughtering according to the Islamic ritual. Recruiting Muslim imams into the chaplain corps of the armed forces, Muslim religious assistants in hospitals and social institutions, the official protection of the 2 Muslim religious holidays, providing cemeteries or sections there for Islamic burial. I think these are fundamental for Muslims in all European states. And I, as a dean yesterday, also speak about these issues in France. I think these are issues, you can find this in all European states. My second point deals with the process of recognition or political incorporation of Muslim organizations. This is interconnected with the first point, because in a lot of areas you need a kind of recognition from the state to have access. For example, the religious assistance in hospitals or prisons, or the religious instruction in schools. So you need a kind of recognition. But this process of incorporation is more than these issues which I mentioned, because it is very important for recognition and representation. It can help to integrate Muslims into the German societies, and that they feel like Jews and Christians, that they in Germany at home. In Europe we have different forms. I mentioned them in Great Britain, in France, in Germany. In Germany we have a secular state. On the one hand, a constitutional separation. On the other hand, a cooperation between state and church. For example, in Germany, the church have a lot of privileges. The religious instruction in schools, for example, is very prominent. The books and the teachers are checked by the churches or by the religious communities, and the teachers are paid by the state. And this is in public schools. Or we have a church tax, a Kirchensteuer, which is collected by the state and delivered to the churches. The churches are in the media body, and so on. So the aim of the Muslim organizations in Germany is to achieve the same rights like the church and the Jewish community. They want an equal treatment by the state. The constitution don't speak about churches. The constitution speak about religious communities. So normally it will be not a problem to integrate also Muslim organizations into this system. But in practice, all these privileges are regulated in the so-called state church law, in the Staatskirchenrecht. And this state church law was developed in the German history for the churches. But the Muslim community in Germany has another structure than the churches. We have no personal membership for everybody who come to the mosque. We have also no clergy. So often these formal arguments are used by politicians to exclude Muslim organizations from these rights. Even the politicians have the possibility to take the constitution and apply it flexible. But in the past they didn't. In my view, the main reason for this is that there is a kind of mistrust and fear that the Islamic organizations are very conservative, and that growing influence of Muslims in the political system of Germany is not good for the society. On the other hand, I think also Muslim organizations have a kind of mistrust when they have dialogue with the authorities, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to the building of compromises, because Muslim organizations have the fear that the government want to assimilate them. I think we have to speak open-minded about this mistrust, and for a long time we don't speak about this mistrust, but now there is a process that we are in dialogue, the Muslim organizations and the state. We have also the problem in Germany, how I said 80% of the Muslims are from Turkey, so we have some big Turkish organizations in Germany which have very close ties to the Turkish government, to Turkish parties and groups. And it is normal that the German government don't want that foreign states have a big influence in their schools or in their institutions. So we have to see there are also problems on the side of the Muslim associations. But at the same time we have to see that this situation that they this close ties between Turkey and Germany, also the German government has a responsibility for that, because in the past it was so that they don't deal with integration, and how Jonathan Lawrence also pointed this out in his research, that the German government make a kind of outsourcing. They said to they support the Turkish government to send imams from Turkey to German. So they supported this. So they have also responsibility for this situation, and we have not to forget this point. I think we have now some positive developments, and I come also to my conclusion. In the last 2 years, we have some positive processes. On the one side, the Muslim organizations accept that it is a problem to have this close ties to Turkey and other foreign states. And now 4 big organizations in Germany, 3 mainly Turkish and 1 is very pluralistic, built one new council. The name of the council is the Coordination Council of Muslims in Germany. So they accept that they have to build an organization which deals with the problems in Germany. The second positive development was mentioned yesterday a lot of times, is the German Conference on Islam. This conference started in September 2006 from the Minister of Interior, Mr. Schäuble. And at the conference, at the beginning, Mr. Schäuble said the Muslim community is a part of Germany. They are a part of Germany. So this is a new and weighty statement for the German society, and it was the first time that a minister have an institutionalized dialogue with the Muslim community. There were a lot of controversies at the beginning of the conference, who will participate and not, because there were some individual persons who were invited with the Muslim organizations. And I think what was behind this kind of invitation is that I think it was a kind of to bring a group of conservative Muslims, the organizations, together with a group of hyper-liberal, and this will result a moderate Muslim. I think this was one of the ideas behind this issue. But I think in the last 2 years, the government understand that this is not possible, because religion is conservative, religion is orthodox, and we have to deal with these religious organizations if we want to achieve something, if we want to have a long-term, broadly and effective impact on the community. So we have to deal with these organizations, and it makes no sense to bring some hyper-liberals, some individuals which are against Islam, and bring them together with Muslim organizations which represent more than 500,000 or 1 million people. So this is a problem. I think the authorities understand this issue. Nevertheless, the German Conference on Islam was a big step forward for Germany, and I think it will influence the integration process of Muslims in Germany deeply in a positive way. There are a lot of efforts in Europe of governments and Muslim associations to cooperate with each other. This must be improved, but we are on a good way. I think for the future, a key issue is the empowerment of Islamic associations and the inner Islamic dialogue. So we have dialogue between the government in the United States and the Muslim organizations. We have dialogue between the governments and Muslim organizations in Europe. But I think what is necessary is the dialogue between Muslim organizations within European countries, and a dialogue between the Muslim organizations in Europe and the United States. This could improve common reasonable concepts for the challenge of the integration of Muslims into Western societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Godard?
Merci. I still want to thank Godard Institute to give the opportunity to speak of as a European of our conception about the connecting the links between governments and Muslims, because connecting governments and Muslim communities in Europe is a challenge which depends on different approaches. in an European context. I'll speak of Europe. I don't speak of USA because I don't know very well the context, but I speak from Europe. Topics can be underlined as 3 points, 4 points. First, the history of the country. Countries with colonial tradition, as France or UK, have a Muslim community which does not include themselves in their country as in other country. In that country which have no long tradition. And an example is the German example, very symbolic. The issue of citizenship, particularly the loyalty to the constitution, is not a problem, is not an issue in UK or in France. Because if we, in UK and France, we say you are not citizens of this country, we will come back. But come back will be, we were still not citizens because we were still during colonialism. We were not a citizen, and still now we are not citizen. So it's very dangerous for in France particularly. So. And the second point is the secularism, the level of secularism. As you know it, in France, our level is very, very high because laïcité is the extreme secularism. So the creation, and if we take the example of the creation of a body of representativeness of Muslims, if we take the French example, we cannot. We were authorized to create an umbrella for the Muslim community to help to create an umbrella only on the worship issues. We are not. We could not speak of religion or something like that, of theology. We could not choose any Muslim delegate. That is better, especially according to level of belief or something like that. On the contrary, in Germany and more in Italy, you wish to look for a widest representativeness of Muslim community, not only in the for worship, issues of worship, is that the choice was by the governments. The people were engaged in religious life, but too, they want, as Mounir said, it was liberal, but liberal are not engaged in the religious life. That is a question. That is, but in France we have no choice. And it was a big reproach to the government not to choose liberal representatives for participate to the CFCM, the French Council for Muslim Faith. That's the consequences of the secularism for us. The fourth, it was the second, it was the second, the fourth. Yes, sorry, the third. The third observation is that maybe religious issues, especially public exercise for worship, are merely local issues. Are they really national issues? That's a question, because the lack of wish for state to centralize, to control, or to have only one negotiator, as it's not the case in USA or in UK or in the Netherlands. Maybe it leaves more liberty to the local initiatives. And it isn't very interesting to see what will happen in Germany, because in Germany you have a local level, which is a Länder, the land. And the question is for the future, what the federal initiative can do with the local approaches. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe I don't know. I have no judgment. But it's interesting to see what is the power. Why? Because one thing. Because for I take the French example, the issue of representativeness at a national level arouse problems, because we are in symbol. We are no more in practice. I know we are really, we are sometimes practice at the national level are important, but sometimes too we are in symbol. And when you go to the symbol, it's very dangerous. It can be very dangerous. Why? Because one community which is not the habit to be considered as a national or ethnic community, which is in a local level. If you go to the national level, you awake some feeling of national feeling. I take by example the French example, the Moroccan and Algerian. If, we can see that during more than 20 years, small Muslim communities, local communities have not known any problem of nationality or ethnic origin. Since the creation of CFCM in 2003, we have seen for the first time serious quarrels between people who know themselves very well, who appreciate themselves because of the national origin. And beyond that, countries of origin have the opportunity to come back among these communities, calling to the national solidarity. That makes no sense at a local level, but completely change the national level. But I want to precise one thing. This link is dialectic. Countries like Turkey or Morocco want to control what they consider as their community in Europe. But they meet people without problem to work in this way without problem. And I will speak of the Moroccan case. The Kingdom of Morocco 5 years ago was not in any way very interested in a centralized control of what they call MRE, Marocain Résident à l'étranger, which is Moroccan living outside the country. But, you know, the security context changed. And for them, for the kingdom, is very, very important to change the way they conduce the links with their community. They created 1 month ago a representativeness body. We can see now French Morocco personality, by example, people elected in municipality as a member of this Moroccan structure. So 2 weeks ago, 250 representatives of French mosques were invited in Marrakesh to hear instructions for the next election at the French Council of Muslim Faith. That's another example. If we consider Turkish communities in France, I think it's just like in a party in Germany. We see that when they build a mosque with their money, then they give the property to Diyanet, which is a Turkish administration in Ankara. You know, so I think that's. But personally, I think that is momentary. New generation will come, not inhibited with their origin, but we have to be careful. Old generation does not want to give their seat to young ones. I mean, I can say the French example with the CFCM. We can see people who are elected for 5 years, more than that. 5 years, and they want for the next election to be present. They don't want to leave another people to be elected. That's a notabilization effect. That must demonstrates one thing: European Islam must be disconnected of the international context. And the international context, I mean, with not only the country of origin, but too with the geopolitical context. Because if we consider security of the Muslim community, because terrorism may be more dangerous for Muslims themselves than for non-Muslims, as long as we suppose the Islam is not a non-domestic religion, we put Muslim in insecurity. We leave hatred preachers taking advantage by victimization. The British example demonstrates Muslim community conscious of the danger has to find by themselves the way to tackle terrorism. And it was a big job which after the 7/7 attempts in London to create a big organism which is preventing extremism together, which was very useful. And we have to work more and more to find best ways to tackle radicalism. And it's not only a matter of religion. As Dunia Bouza said yesterday, it's necessary to deconstruct attraction for radicalism. And one example, pictures of Al-Qaeda on website do more danger, have more effects than any preach. And often we knew that, we saw that in France, young people which go to Iraq from Muslim countries or European countries to die in suicide attacks don't know anything about the Quran. And sadly, that's very, we can, and this is the part of the sociological component of the terrorists now is changing in Europe. It's no more like we saw 10 years ago, people who were very was in religious route. I don't want to finish on a pessimistic appreciation. To take only one example, the political participation of young Muslims in Germany, the Netherlands, and UK are as voters or as elected in parliament shows values of inclusion and the desire of citizenship. Let's be careful, and especially in France, I'm not a chauvinist, considering the place given by the political parties to young people not to despair this wish of citizenship. So I finished.
Thank you very much. Mayor Greenwald.
Hi. Good morning. It's nice to see so many people taking an interest in this important topic. My name is Sue Greenwald, and I'm the mayor of the city of Davis, California. This morning, I'm just going to give you a brief summary of how we've tried to deal with the issue of welcoming and integrating our Islamic citizens and residents into the life in the city of Davis, and how we are trying to deal with perceptions of discrimination. Of course, the state plays no role in religion in the United States, and dealing with Islamic integration is predominantly left to the local levels and to voluntary organizations. Davis is a university town located 20 minutes from the state capital in Sacramento, and under an hour and a half from San Francisco. This town of 65,000 residents is the home of the University of California at Davis, one of the major University of California campuses. The Sacramento region of California has a large Islamic American population, and the university as well has a large community of Islamic students and faculty and residents. The discussion of integrating and accepting Islamic citizens cannot be separated from our attempts to embrace and accept all of our ethnic and religious minorities. We in the city of Davis have always considered ourselves to be a progressive community with a high value placed on human rights and a strong belief in celebrating the gifts that diversity brings to our community. That said, the minority citizens, the perceptions of our minority citizens are often out of sync with our city's prevailing self-image. To the perpetual surprise of the good liberal citizens of Davis, many minority citizens and guests feel unwelcome even in our progressive university town. This sentiment has been expressed to me over and over again ever since I came to Davis about 20 years ago, and I hear it still today. The fact that our Islamic citizens tend to be professionals of higher socioeconomic class has not lessened this perception of discrimination, which is somehow surprising, I think. The feelings of lack of acceptance by children in the schools and the ubiquitous issue of racial profiling in law enforcement are the two most frequently mentioned problems that I've heard. Racial profiling, of course, includes a sense by many minorities, including many of our professionals, that they are stopped more frequently by the police due to the shade of their skin or their hairstyle, and that they are not treated well when they're stopped. This has always been a surprise. We have faculty and distinguished tenured faculty who have been stopped by the police because they feel, and they're angry about it. After 9/11, of course, there was a lot of fear within the Islamic community of retribution and lack of acceptance. And this was fear that was felt by all of us, concern and apprehension about what was going to happen. All politics is local, of course, and ultimately discrimination takes place in our cities and our schools, and it is here that we have to deal with it. It came as a terrible shock to our community when, in 1983, back in 1983, a young Vietnamese high school student named Tong Hai Nguyen was stabbed to death by another student in a racially motivated killing. In response to this 1983 murder, the Davis School District created a series of institutions to try to deal with inclusion and hate crimes. For example, they have a special day called Walk in Another's Shoes during the school's Human Relations Week. The school district is involved with ongoing attempts to deal with diversity, bullying, racial discrimination. In the United States, our cities and schools are completely separate jurisdictions, and each has its own diversity programs in Davis. The city immediately took a number of steps after this 1983 hate crime. We reactivated our dormant Human Relations Commission, which did both diversity outreach and education, and originally back then heard specific citizen complaints and mediated disputes. We established the annual Tong Hai Nguyen Awards, given in the fields of civil rights, humanitarianism, and human service. We give a Young Humanitarian Award, a Peace Officer of the Year Award. This is a big deal at the City Council. We have a reception, and like all the City Council meetings, it's televised and videotaped and archived on streaming video. The city organizes annual celebrations for Martin Luther King Day and Cesar Chavez Day. These are very well attended by the entire community. After 9/11, Islamic citizens and guests became the focus of hate crimes nationally, as you know. In California, we were particularly concerned and sensitive to the downside potential due to our special history with what happened to the Japanese in California during World War II and the Japanese concentration camps during World War II. And of course, we all have a lot of Japanese American citizens. We had a city council member who was a former city council member who had been interred in a Japanese concentration camp, and a county supervisor whose parents were. So this was very close to us, this experience of what can happen. We know perhaps more immediately than those from elsewhere in the country how quickly xenophobia can pollute the atmosphere during times of war and after an incident such as the 9/11 attack. With the experience of the Japanese Americans during World War II in mind after 9/11, the city and our local religious institutions took a number of proactive actions. The city passed a number of resolutions about hate crimes, and including a resolution opposed to the excesses of the Patriot Act, with specific reference to the need to protect the civil rights of Islamic citizens and residents. We felt very strongly as a city about the potential implications and the direction that federal legislation could be going. After 9/11, the Davis Islamic Center, in Davis we have an Islamic center. It's very active because we have such a large Islamic community. It held a series of community open houses with refreshments and socializing. The community was given tours of the Islamic Center and descriptions of Islamic worship and teachings. Leaders of the Islamic community were invited to churches and synagogues. This was an action taken on the part of our local churches and synagogues to explain the true nature of Islamic teachings and to dispel myths. And I have to say that I personally learned an awful lot during this period about Islam. When a crescent recently was stolen on top of the new mosque that was built in Davis, the entire community helped to raise funds to replace it. The Davis Islamic Center began to host an annual community iftar with great food, speakers, and prayers. The Islamic students at the university were very active in organizing this, as well as the Islamic Center, and had a lot of members of the Sacramento region Islamic community came to this event. The entire community was invited, and the guests included many of our elected officials, including myself, the chancellor of the university. This event has been so well attended over the last few years that we can't find a hall large enough to hold it in Davis. Two interfaith traditions were founded in Davis in response to 9/11. One is called the Care for God's Creation, which is an interfaith community whose purpose was to provide opportunities in Northern California for environmental groups and all religious groups to work together for the common purpose, something that binds us all together, which is the study and action on behalf of God's creation and the environment. This has been a great, a common effort, a common glue that holds us all together. The leaders and members of the local Islamic organizations have been major participants in this, along with the other religious institutions. Christian, Islamic, and Jewish leaders also joined together to hold an annual event called the Feast of Abraham. This is a community-wide event during which speakers from each of the three Abrahamic religions speak on selected fundamental questions and bring to light teachings and insights from their respective religions. Members of the community are randomly seated in groups at round tables. Each topic is addressed first by a religious leader from each of the three Abrahamic religions, and it's followed by a discussion at the tables. This event also has been very well attended every year. One of our churches, which serves the student population, has built dormitories specifically designed for students of different faiths to live together and get to know each other. During the intense period after 9/11, we had an incident of perceived discrimination involving what should have been a very minor police incident with an Islamic American Davis High School student. This was a very high-profile event, created a lot of discussion, had a lot of people showed up at the city council, very upset about it. Our city council meetings went long into the night with public comment, as they frequently do with stop signs, but this time it was with a civil rights issue. And this event brought back into focus the issue of racial profiling, which has been an acknowledged problem of long standing in our community. proposals for civilian police review board surfaced and were discussed at length by our Human Relations Commission and by the City Council. A number of cities have such a board, which has the power to investigate police actions. Our police department was adamantly opposed to a full-blown civilian review board. This is understandable in a small town like Davis. We took that into account. We want to try to work things out in a collaborative fashion, if possible. Also, our finance department was worried about the cost of doing this. Budgets are very tight these days in cities, as you all know. And our city attorney was worried about the liability issues, the personnel confidentiality issues, labor law issues involved with civilian control. Instead, we settled on a 4-part program to try to deal with this issue, which we've just been. It's pretty new, and we're looking at it very carefully. It includes hiring an independent ombudsman, creating a citizens advisory board, creating a police advisory committee, which I'll describe briefly, and further diversity training for police and other city staff. Our Citizens Advisory Board consists of 17 citizens selected by the police chief. These are community leaders. One position is designated for an Islamic representative. They meet monthly in order to provide input to the police department regarding constituent concerns, issues that come up, and to open up a two-way dialogue between the police department and the community, and to give suggestions on improving procedure. Our police advisory committee is a little more formal. It consists of 3 members who are appointed by the city manager's office. Now, it was very important for us to have a group that was not under control of the police department, but under control of the city manager's department, under civilian control, basically. They are non-police officers with backgrounds in law enforcement or legal system, such as esteemed people with a lot of respect by the police and the citizens, such as retired judges, retired police chiefs, and attorneys. The primary function of this committee is to review completed citizen complaint investigations. Every time a citizen makes a formal complaint, the Police Advisory Committee reviews it and gives recommendations on improving police procedure. They have access to records, which the other committee doesn't, and they talk to they can talk to the aggrieved citizens and make specific procedural changes. To give you an example of the procedural change that has recently been suggested, formally after a citizen's complaint was filed, a form letter was sent out telling the complainant about the complaint's disposition. The Police Advisory Committee suggested instead a personalized letter giving full descriptions of the thinking of the police department and the investigation results, much more personalized approach. In our police department, an effort has been made to develop inclusionary. We are developing inclusionary training, and others, and the rest of the city staff is also going to be taking this inclusionary training. We've always had diversity training, but it's becoming a much more rigorous program. Finally, our ombudsman is an outside professional. We've hired on contract someone with experience in mediating complaints, and citizens have direct access to this police ombudsman who has a good relationship with the police department but is not part of the police department. And he helps to guide the citizens through the review and then reviews the complaints as well. And it gives advice to the police department on how to improve the situation. So we're really taking vigorous steps to try to deal with the issue of racial profiling, and which is always going to be there. Just anecdotally, I'd like to say I talk a lot with our police officers. They're wonderful guys, but sometimes they don't really understand the problems. One of our old police officers came up to me, long-standing ones. He said, "Sue, what can we do if we hear that a black person's robbed a bank? We have to stop them, stop black people." He said, "You always wear a straw hat outside, and if someone with a straw hat robbed a bank, would stop you." And I said, "Yeah, I understand that, and I understand you're in a tough position there. You're walking a very fine line, but we don't have very many black residents in Davis, and that means any time a black person creates a crime, our black citizens are being stopped, and that means they're stopped a lot. And if some woman with a straw hat kept robbing banks, and I was stopped a lot, I could take off my straw hat if it became a problem. But they can't take off their skin color, and so we have to understand there's a two-way problem here, and I think that we're making great strides in getting the police to understand what it would be like to stand in the shoes of somebody who is stopped frequently just because of the shade of their skin or for their facial features being different from the majority of us. So finally, just briefly, our Islamic organized communities are doing more to reach out and include the local elected officials in their activities, and that's been very, very helpful. I've been invited to many of the meetings of CARE, and give you another example. When the American Pakistani Association of the Sacramento region celebrated the 60th anniversary of the founding of the state of Pakistan. I was a keynote speaker and addressed a group of 1,800 Pakistanis who came to our Mondavi Center. So there's much more feeling of involvement on the part of elected officials and understanding of the organizations of the Islamic Americans in the Sacramento region. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Madni?
Thank you. I'd like to thank Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, particularly Philippa Strum and her colleagues, for the kind invite. And it's been a very interesting 48 hours, and great discussion has already taken place. So thank you for that. My name is Sajida Madni. I am a broad-based community organizer for an organization called Birmingham Citizens in the United Kingdom. It's an organization with lots of mosques, churches, trade unions, schools, gurdwaras, other faith groups and non-faith groups, all working together on issues of social justice and for the common good. So it's a lot about focusing on the many, many things that we have in common rather than the fewer things that we have in different. How do Muslim communities and government connect in Birmingham? Birmingham is England's second city. It's a very multicultural city. In fact, it's a population of about 1 million people, but it's actually tipped to be, by the year 2012, to be the first majority-minority city in Europe. So the ethnic minority groups will be expected to be the majority in the year 2012. A lot of government funding is now available in all over the UK. There's the Preventing Extremism funds, Racial Equalities funds, Communities Cohesion funds, and Community Development funds. However, a lot of the money, not all of it, but a lot of it goes to yes groups who conform to guidelines provided by councils and grant makers who don't sometimes allow for real frank discussions to take place. But what seems to be tokenistic funds to just brush the real issues under the carpet. For instance, they don't want the role of foreign policy in fueling terrorism and extremism to even enter the discussion. So often the money is spent on groups that are not going to hold councils and public officials to account, and just to groups who do a lot of great research, but then nothing ever happens with that research. The fact is that communities, funding that goes to, for example, mosques or Islamic organizations or churches that are doing a lot of interfaith work, the fact is that the people who are prone to extremism and messages, extremist messages, you can't find them in churches and mosques and all the great places of worship. These are people who often go unheard. These are people who feel voiceless, especially young people who feel alienated and segregated. And when you feel like that, when you feel like you have no sense of belonging anywhere, so when someone comes along and says, you know what, you can make a great impact here, you'll die doing it, but you'll make an impact. So when you feel just completely alienated, those sort of messages, you'll be prone to accept that. Now, I'm not condoning any attacks on anyone and what these people do at all. I'm just trying to get into the mind of people who just don't understand the sanctity of life at all. So these are the people that are susceptible to these extremist messages because they have nowhere else to turn to. Governments have to work together with Muslim organizations to listen to people, to consult people more, and really make every person feel that they do matter, that they're not voiceless. Funding needs to go to training and developing leadership skills so that everyone feels that they have the skills to contribute to society. In mosques, I'm talking as a Muslim here, our mosques need to stop talking about young people not being attached to the mosque. Why should they feel attached to the mosque if the imam doesn't even speak their language? Why should they feel attached to the mosque when the mosque committees are full of full of men who don't speak the language, full of men who don't even remember what it was like to be young anymore. So if you want young people to feel a connection with the mosque, put them on the mosque committees. And instead, as a community, we like to be reactive, and that's a problem that we have to address within our own community. We're not proactive enough. When something goes wrong, we send out the press releases then. We start voicing our opinions then. What we need to do is, instead of whining and complaining about policing going wrong or the negative image that the media has of us Muslims and government is not doing enough, we need to educate our young people and tell them, look, join the police force, become a journalist, get involved with the media, and join political parties, or at least go out there and vote. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't believe in apathy. I believe in disengaged people, and it is because they feel voiceless, that they are tired of the same old routine, that they're not heard, that they don't bother anymore. But it's up to us then to engage people. We have a moral responsibility to address this as a Muslim community and get people engaged in civic society again. The way to do it is to first of all have an open and frank discussion. Let's not shirk away from the real issues. As Muslims, let's not react badly to comments made about us. Those comments are made by people who don't have an understanding of what Islam really is about. So we failed as a community there because, frankly, they misunderstand because we haven't done a good enough job in educating people. We haven't done a good enough job to build relationships with groups other than just us Muslim ones. And even within the Muslim community, certainly in Birmingham, we have a lot of community cohesion now taking place. And I'll come on to all the wonderful positive work that is coming on. But then we also have this ghettoization. We have, even within the Muslim community, we have areas where the Somalian Muslims will not talk to the Pakistani Muslims, who will not talk to the black Muslims or the Bengali Muslims, and there is even within the Muslim community segregation there. So we have to do a better job within our own communities to unite our own communities as well, and to dispel the misconceptions that other people have about us. So in effect, and I don't mean to be so harsh, we have to stop whining and start acting together for positive change. In our organisation, Birmingham Citizens, that's exactly what we're doing. Our chairman is here today, as he mentioned, Bishop Derek Webley. Yesterday he mentioned that there was an area in Birmingham that faced some racial disturbances some time back and some conflict. Birmingham Citizens, under the leadership of Bishop Derek Webley, got together overnight 40 faith leaders to give a press conference calling for peace, for restoration of peace in that community. He was able to do that because he was already in relationship. Those 40 faith leaders were already in relationship with one another and working together on various issues. Now, these are very, very busy people. They stand on World Faith Councils. They're heading large organizations. But they got together because this was important to them and because they were in relationship with one another. So, politicians and government agencies should be falling over each other to have a conversation with groups like Birmingham Citizens. When Tony Blair, former Prime Minister, was going around in his election campaign, he called our organisation to talk to some young Muslims. And one of our young Muslims had a 45-minute conversation with him, and he actually put that in a report about and consulted that young person again when it was when he wanted to talk to about young Muslim issues. So it is only through relationships that extremism can be fought. I don't go around, as I mentioned as well yesterday, when we're talking about integration and assimilation and whatnot, I don't think to myself, and young Muslims don't think to themselves, right, integration in Birmingham, we need to go out there and talk to at least 5 non-Muslims this week. It just doesn't happen. It's something that we just don't think about. We get asked by media all the time, do you feel that you are a British Muslim first or a Muslim in Britain? And again, it's something that we don't think about. We are British and we are Muslim and we are Pakistani and we embrace all of that. So in our organisation and in my house, actually, my family, it's quite normal for my brother to go to church on Sunday, for me to go to the Gurdwara on a Thursday, and this is something, because of Birmingham Citizens, we're in relationship with lots of different groups. We don't go out there and say to our church leaders and our Sikh leaders that Islam means peace. Don't listen to what's been said on the Daily Mail or any other newspaper. We're all about promoting peace and justice in our society. I don't need to do that because they already know that Sajida Madni is just a normal person who likes the normal things that we like, and let's work together on issues that, she's concerned about education and housing, and so am I, and hey, she supports Manchester United Football Club and so do I, and or at least she likes football. So let's concentrate on those things. And she can't be all that bad, that they can't be right about what they say about Muslims in the media, because she seems to be okay and she's a Muslim. And so we don't need to go out there and drill it in people's head that Muslims are good people. We just need to be talking to one another. So Muslim organizations, ourselves, we have a responsibility to challenge extremism directly. And examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, serve as the greatest examples. For instance, when Muslims were persecuted in Mecca, when it first, it was the community where they believed in lots of idols and gods, and when this concept of one God came along, there was faced a lot of persecution in the Muslim community. And so the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told a group of people who were being persecuted the most to migrate to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. And when the Muslims got there, the Abyssinian king, Christian king, said, you're welcome here, but you have to conform to the laws of Abyssinia. And they didn't turn around and say, no, we believe in the Sharia law and we want to change this community and no, you've got to follow our law. No, they said, yeah, okay, fine, we've got to follow the law of the land here. And that's what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, encouraged. So I'm incredibly lucky, and I think as Muslims we're incredibly lucky to be living in the UK. What's the alternative? We have a lot more freedom in the UK to express our religious values and to express our faith than in other countries. For example, in Saudi Arabia, where I wouldn't be allowed to go out without a Muslim male relative present with me, or Turkey, where there's a ban on headscarf. If you want to work for the government, you're not allowed to wear the hijab. So what is the alternative? We've got more freedom in the UK than we have in our Muslim countries. In the UK, in schools, we have prayer room facilities and prayer facilities that are available and are a must. If we want an Islamic society, a Jewish society, a Christian society, we have the freedom to organize those. So yes, we've got to recognize that publicly and give credit where it's due. We should definitely hold to account the police and the government when we feel there's an injustice taking place, but at the same time we should be honest with ourselves and hold ourselves and each other to account. So in our organisation, in Birmingham Citizens, people are already doing that. We rarely come together and talk about the things that are going wrong unless we say, right, well, we've got to act on our shared values and principles and put things to right. Just to conclude with a story, I'm a member of various Islamic organisations in the UK, and one of our presidents of one of the societies was visiting us from another country, and it fell upon me and my duty to show him around Birmingham and show him around the different work that we're doing, the young Muslims are doing in Birmingham. So I got a bunch of young Muslims together, and for a week I was there sort of briefing them and saying to them, right, when this guy comes over, you got to make sure that your Arabic is top notch. You've got to make sure that you say your inshallah, your God willings and your mashallahs all in the right places, and at least say it once every sentence. And make sure that you're dressed in your Islamic gear and be really polite. And also all of this briefing really took place, and took them on this training. And I said, also don't mention anything else about anything else. Just how Muslims are really at the forefront of community life here in Birmingham. So they were all ready, and they were all we're ready, and sort of almost had it scripted. So when it was time for me to pick him up from the airport, and I had these young people at the back of the car, we were driving past this one place in one street in Birmingham where they had a church on one side and a convent on the other side, and this church and convent were both members of Birmingham Citizens, and the young Muslim group was a member of Birmingham Citizens. So these young Muslims were used to going to the churches and the mosques and the schools and the convent as well, and they really feel at home there. So as we were driving past, one of the young people shouts out, "Oh, and this is our church and this is our convent." And they were like, I was like, oh no, oh my goodness, what's happened here? And he turned around and he didn't say anything. So we got even more nervous. And we went to the mosque, and he sat us down and he said, so and so mentioned, that's your church and that's your convent. What do you mean exactly by that? So if that wasn't enough, the same young person says, yeah, we go to worship there on Sundays, and we hold regular circles at the convent on Friday evenings. And the president was like, what do you mean, though? How do you have ownership over somebody else's faith institution? So he explained the work of Birmingham Citizens and what we're doing there. And, people say to me, what is your biggest victory? We have a lot of victories. By working together, we've got some of the most run-down parks and public spaces refurbished. Drug dealers were pushed out. We've got our streets are safer. The crime levels have gone down as a result of our organising. Some schools who were sort of not we call it special measures, but who were not performing so great, and the league tables were very low. Have come out of special measures and are doing great work now, and on the league tables are performing really well. But I think the biggest victory that we have is that young Muslims, young Christians, young Sikhs, and old Christians, Muslims and Sikhs have ownership over each other's faith institutions. We don't feel uncomfortable going in one another's faith institutions. We don't feel uncomfortable picking up the phone and calling the Archbishop or Baisai from the Gurdwara and saying, come to our house just for a meal, or let's get together and talk about these issues. So even now, I was recently at a conference with a Sikh, young Sikh person, and he said to me, I've been meaning to ask a Muslim this question for a while now, since the Archbishop of Canterbury made his speech, but I've been too shy to ask it. But because I have a relationship with you, Sajida, and I know that you won't mind, what is your stance on this Sharia law debate? And I thought, goodness, if only people were not shy enough to ask those questions, if that we were in relationship with one another, that people would feel comfortable to have that discussion. And, within 5 minutes, he was able to feel comfortable and this dispelling this misconceptions that Muslims want public beheadings to take place now in Britain. Fear and all these misconceptions were gotten rid of just because that person felt that he had a good enough relationship with me to ask a simple question. So this is the great work that is going on in Birmingham. There's a lot of, the Muslim community who, as I mentioned yesterday, who felt that the police were the lowest of the low and the scum and didn't want anything to do with the police. When we got the police together in a mosque and just sharing a meal with the Muslim community, the community realized that they're human beings as well, and they're working for us, and let's work together. And then a year later, they were awarding the police, giving a prize to the police for working with them. So just by working together in relationship and not going out there and saying, Islam means peace and the terrorists are a minority, and trying hard to dispel these rumors, just by being in relationship, people can see that. This is how we have to do it, I believe, is not from the pulpits and not from the stages, but at grassroots level, just being in connecting to one another and just talking to one another about our similarities rather than our differences. So and it's working in Birmingham, slowly but surely. It is definitely working, and it's one model that has been very successful there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all four of you. We've gotten quite different takes on the problems and the issue, and yet I don't think that they're competing or conflicting takes at all. And so I'm very grateful to all of you, as I think those of you in the audience must be. And in fact, it is now your turn to ask whatever questions you would like, and to raise whatever additional issues you would like, or to ask for elucidation of things that have already been discussed. As you are called upon, would you be good enough to wait for the microphone to come around, and also to identify yourself before you begin asking your question? Who would like to begin? There's a gentleman up in the front here. Just wait for the microphone, sir.
I have one or two small questions, which is basically...
Would you identify yourself,
I'm
sir?
Lorenzo Morris. I'm the chair of the Political Science Department at Howard University in Washington. To Sajida Madni, if I pronounced that correctly, I was interested in your talk generally, but a couple of technical points. You said that Birmingham was about to become the first majority-minority city, and this relates to my question to Mr. Azzaoui, if I say that correctly, about the presence and growth of the Muslim communities in Europe. So when you say majority minority, do you mean majority immigrant population, first or second generation? Do you mean majority immigrant Muslim population, immigrant from outside of Europe? And so just what does that mean in terms of the presence of Muslims, not only in Birmingham but in Great Britain and perhaps in Europe? And then similarly, you said that there were 3 million Muslims in Germany, and I wanted to know what significance that had for, as far as you knew, as a proportion of the population in Western Europe. Okay.
Thank you. Let's let Sajida start. Okay.
When I say majority minority, it's just anything that ticks the box other than white Caucasian, really, in Birmingham. I'm not sure exactly of the demographics in the population, but there's a large Muslim community in Birmingham, and I think 74% of the Muslim population is from Pakistani background. So there's a lot of influence, even in our council structures, and there's a lot of Muslim councillors and Muslim members of parliament. So it's well represented. But in terms of the first majority minority city, it's anything that isn't just white, really. It's black, brown, yellow. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
The birth rates of Muslims in Germany are higher than the average, but I have no exact figures about the future. But I think this question raises another big question. So in Europe, sometimes you have the fear that there will be kind of Islamization, and the Muslims will be more than the Christians, and so we have an Islamic State in the future and such things. And I think you have similar debates here in the States about Hispanics, and that the Hispanics are changing this Anglo-Protestant culture and become a majority. I think these are same fears, and we have to talk about these fears. And I think it is necessary that politicians recognize, if we now make the right measures and integrate people socially and economically, these people will change, and they will also be something good for our society in the future.
Thank you. All right, Susan, would you start with the lady right there, and then we'll go to the gentleman. Do you want to raise your hand, ma'am, so she can see who you are? And then that way.
My name is Nadia, and I'm a student at Georgetown University. I was just wondering about the efforts of public diplomacy on the part of the government. I'm familiar with the work of the British Council, and they've kind of, as you said, poured in funding into that. And so I was just wondering, with the other countries as well, what are the positive developments of that, and also the challenges encountered in government-sponsored public diplomacy?
Do you want
So, did you want other countries other than the United?
I'm not sure, other than the British example, that occurs in France or Germany either.
So, I mean, as said, in Britain, there's a lot of funding, and more Muslims are encouraged to join various organizations, government-funded organizations, and I mean, we can't really complain much in terms of the opportunities that are available to Muslims and to be able to express their faith any which way that they want to. What was interesting to me yesterday was that the head of the Police Foundation said that you couldn't wear a headscarf and be a police officer here in the United States, or a turban or whatever. And in the United Kingdom, we're very lucky that the police specifically do go to mosques to recruit young Muslims, and we're able to wear our headscarves. Sikhs are able to wear their turbans and become a police officer, and sensitive cultural training, Islamic cultural awareness training takes place within the police in-house training as well. And similarly, there is a lot of opportunities that available to Muslims in England. I mean, there's a lot that's not right as well, which we're trying to fix with community organisations. But certainly, in terms of the opportunities available for us, we can't really complain.
The lady back there, please.
Thank you. My name is Marietje Schaake. I'm from the Netherlands, and I've worked in the field of integration and diversity for a while now, also from a transatlantic perspective. And when I look at the issue that we're talking about, I believe that what we're trying to do is sort of heal our societies. And it seems that also when I hear all of your reflections, there's a bit of a risk that's trickling in to overemphasize, I believe, on religion and on the Muslim communities, because what I observe is a great sense of resentment and feelings of exclusion among, let's say, in the Dutch example, the ethnically Dutch, but I'm talking about the majority communities in general, because when I hear a reflection on people feeling unheard and being sick of being talked about, I believe this is the exact same on the side of majorities who feel like the well-willingness of people to include the Muslim community has perhaps gone out of proportion. I'm not saying it's not important. I just think it's become disproportionate at times while the majority populations are overlooked. And I'm wondering what your sense about this is, because I believe it breeds populism and reactionary responses that are very, very risky, and that when we look at governments just reaching out to the Muslim community are not helping this problem whatsoever. So,
could I very briefly...
Would you just wait one moment, sir, and give these other people a chance to answer? Would you like to address that, either of you? Or do?
Yeah. Maybe I agree for the part when you say that, if I have understood, that it is an oversizing of the Muslim community. That is a question. Oversight,
I'm basically talking about proportionality, and for example, in the Netherlands, there's a large secular tradition, and increasingly a way of governments to reach out to immigrant minorities or Muslim communities has been by addressing people based on their religious identity, for example. And we've heard some examples today of interfaith initiatives, etc. And as good as they are, and I recognize that they're very important and they're very good for building social cohesion, they exclude a significant proportion of people who do not identify as based on their religion, and who do not feel appealed to by the well-willingness that I think is prevalent in the government to embrace Muslim communities. There are also those who are unwilling and who are afraid and who feel excluded and not empowered in their own right. And I believe that only by including these people we can solve the problems that our societies face. So if you were to ask me, the role of the government in helping Muslim communities should include bringing people together and focusing on the group of people who are reluctant to move in the direction of an integrated society, who feel threatened by an integrated society.
Yes, I understand. But there is two problems. I answer as a French. I mean, from a secular system, extremely secular system. The initiative we took for an umbrella, to take an umbrella for the Muslim from Muslim community, was not Muslim community, was Muslim believer and practitioner who practice. So when we begin this work, we thought that we can work only for the cults, only for worship. And we don't mind about citizenship of the others, of the young Muslim. That was not our problem. Our problem is to say, First of all, we have for the Muslim, they can practice only that. And what happened? And some think that, be careful, because you say that, you think that, but politicians and other persons say that they don't think like you. They want to use this body for other things, to take for problem from Muslim as a community. What community? And so that danger is effectively that if you work on a community to make a representativeness of a Muslim, even if you want to limit this representativeness only for the religious, for the strictly religious problem, and you take it on the side, and then you work for citizenship and other things, it's a problem. But I think, no, in Europe, than I said 3 days ago, there is no Islamophobia in France. There is a problem of marginalization or something about discrimination of young people, of poor people. Even they are Muslim, they are Sikhs, and don't know religion. But now, 3 years after, we are obliged to enter on a conception, and that's very dangerous. I agree with you that we have not to consider, because an individual only on his religious identity, and that is reality. And but the things, the problem is that that's very dangerous, and the identification, the identity, Muslim identity, which is an element of other element for the personality. I mean, the humanist, and you speak, and the Netherlands is a good example, because you had in the 3 pillars, you have the humanist pillar, which is not a religious pillar in strictly, and disappeared. I mean, the system of pillars, the Dutch pillars, is still there, but it's in the memory. But it would be a very, very interesting to take maybe the only pillar which we need in our society, in European society, is the humanist pillar. And the second, the other pillars, I mean, religious pillar, are very secondary. You know what I mean? I don't know if I answer your question, but as a French people, we don't have the same problem, because we are not confronted with the identification from people to their Muslim personality. We don't Muslim are it's only an issue of worship. It's a question, an issue of worship, and then we are victim, or we are obliged to face this, even if we, as from the government, when we say it's only worship, they say no, it's not a issue of worship. It's a question of identity, of terrorism, of mentality, tradition. But as Mounir said, I repeat that, if you take religion is conservative. It's a conservative system, and if you want to work with people outside the religion, with liberal individualities, you don't have to work with religious people.
I think the gentleman here wants to follow up on that.
Yes, my name is Tom Gallagher. I've actually just taken up a fellowship at the National Endowment for Democracy, looking at the mistakes which have flowed from the British state's overemphasis on privileging ethnic and religious identities. And I'd just like to reinforce and very briefly take a little further the point that the previous questioner just made. I mean, why should governments consider religious affiliation to be the most important thing about Muslim citizens? I mean, do we need to treat Muslims primarily as Muslims? I mean, this question was asked by a very renowned German scholar who, because he found the climate in Germany uncongenial, Bassam Tibi, has emigrated to the United States. I mean, the danger is that, if you privilege cultural and religious identities over the political community, over the demos, over the community of citizens with rights and entitlements, inevitably the initiative passes, to people of a conservative, even a reactionary disposition, who impose an authoritarian climate within their own communities, and people within minority communities who feel they have more in common with the rest of society are trapped, and they are in a very dangerous situation. So my final point really is that public identity should be based on individual rights and responsibilities, not group rights and responsibilities, because that, the identities, collective identities now in my country are very fragile. The state lacks legitimacy, it lacks the leverage, the outreach it previously possessed, and if you go for a process of balkanisation, of trying to manage complex, fragile communities through gatekeepers, you lose control of the situation. It leads to a gradual dissolution of state and society. I mean, what you describe about Birmingham is very, very encouraging. I mean, a lot of common endeavours, transcending religious boundaries, but I'm afraid to say that the Birmingham situation is the exception to the rule in the rest of urban Britain.
Would anyone like to comment on that? Sajida, do you want to comment?
I'll be the first. I mean, there is a sense of, I think, a resentment from other communities, and I'll be first to admit that even Muslims feel that there's more emphasis on Muslims than any other group in the UK. That the government is, or officials are reaching out too much to Muslim communities than any other group. The fact of the matter is, I'm speaking as a Muslim and being part of very many Muslim groups, is that we don't actually want that attention, and we actually celebrate the day that we're not in the media, and it just seems, even it's really quite sad, but when the Virginia Tech shooting took place, the Muslim community, the first reaction was, oh God, okay, that's sad, but please let it not be a Muslim. And, and even then, there were angles where, he had apparently joined a Muslim society, or he had conversations with Muslims. Even then, so, we'd welcome the change. I mean, again, in Birmingham, as you say, it is an exception where we just focus on, in our organisation anyway, the things that we have in common and transcending any religious or cultural or whatever have you barriers. But just a sense in the Muslim community in general in the United Kingdom and being part of those groups, we would love if we were just treated like just everybody else, and even, I mean, it's sad, but another organisation that I'm volunteering with actually said to me when I was writing a grant application, he was white and I'm a Muslim and not white, and he said, well, could you put I'll write the grant bit, but could you put your name on it, because it'd probably be a better chance of a Muslim woman getting it than for me. And that's really sad state of affairs, but it's true. But again, the majority of the Muslim population don't actually want a part of it, don't actually want that attention. But again, it's up to us then to work with media and to portray a different image, and to work with people of other faiths and other communities on things that we have in common then.
Mounir?
Very short. On the one hand, I would agree that we have to speak less about Islam, because we have a lot of socio-economic problems which are Islamized. For example, for 1 year we had the debate in Germany about violence in schools, and then the media and the politicians asked the question, what say Quran about violence? And that is irrational, because there were economic problems. In the school there were only some teachers, no director for about 1 or 2 years. So these are social problems. So we have to speak about social issues and not about Islam. But on the other hand, we have also to see that there is a terrorist threat, and that we have people who are Islamist terrorists. And there's a big debate going on in the public, and we as Muslims, if we like it or not, we have to face these issues, and we have to speak about these issues. And the second is, you have also to respect or to accept the reality in German society. How I said, we have a cooperation between church and state in Germany. and the Muslim community want the same rights like the church and the Jewish community. This is the debate now in Germany, that we have the same rights, there is a cooperation, and we want the same cooperation. And it's too philosophical to come and say collective rights are not okay, because we have a legal situation there, and we have a need, and we want that. And I think Germany shows that collective rights are also possible to integrate into society, and this is not must be a problem.
Let's please come up here. Akasi, you want to bring the microphone up here, please, and then we'll go. Then Zahid will go to you. Oh, okay, fine. Do you want to use that? That's great. We're going to have. You could say it in French, and then yes, we're going to have translation.
Azzaoui from France.
Azzaoui from France. Yeah, I'm going to do it.
Je vois que la perception de l'islam et de l'intégration des musulmans est différente suivant le pays dans lequel on vit.
The perception of Islam and Muslims is different according to the country in which we live.
Je pense essentiellement qu'il y a des choses sur lesquelles on est d'accord. Les musulmans doivent faire un effort, qui habitent en Europe et dans le monde occidental de façon générale, et l'administration et le gouvernement doivent faire un effort aussi.
There are things on which we can agree, and in particular on the fact that on their part Muslims must do some endeavors, and on the other hand the administration must also work to integrate Muslims into the society.
Les musulmans doivent faire un effort d'adaptation des textes fondateurs de l'islam.
First, the Muslims must adapt by developing a Muslim law that fits to the realities of Europe.
Ça passe à mon sens par trois choses essentielles. Un, développer ce qu'on appelle en arabe un fiqh, c'est-à-dire une jurisprudence en phase avec les réalités européennes et le monde occidental.
So this consists of first developing a custom law that fits to Western realities.
Deuxième chose, c'est très important, rejeter toutes les fatwas anarchiques qui n'ont rien à voir avec les réalités européennes.
Second, and this is very important, Muslims must reject every anarchical fatwa, and especially those that come from foreign countries.
C'est très important aussi, on a beaucoup insisté, se libérer de l'influence étrangère. Les musulmans qui habitent en France doivent s'exprimer en tant que Français, ceux qui habitent en Grande-Bretagne doivent s'exprimer en tant qu'Anglais, et ceux qui habitent en Allemagne doivent absolument s'exprimer en tant qu'Allemands, et ça n'empêche pas, ça n'enlève en rien le fait qu'ils soient musulmans, comme les autres sont chrétiens ou sont juifs.
And in general, Muslims must free themselves from foreign influences, and in particular, French Muslims must speak as French people, and German Muslims as German people, and British Muslims as British, and this doesn't hinder their Muslim identity.
Pour l'administration extra-habitement, trois choses essentielles aussi, il y a beaucoup de, mais j'insiste essentiellement sur trois choses. L'administration, les gouvernements doivent faire un effort pour permettre aux musulmans de pratiquer leur culte dans des conditions dignes.
On its part, the administration must also work on it, and first, it must allow the Muslims to worship in a way that respects their dignity.
C'était une phrase qu'on entend souvent en France. Les musulmans de France ont le droit de porter une foi, ils ont le droit de vivre leur foi, ils ont le droit de transmettre leur foi à leurs enfants dans le respect des lois républicaines.
And so here is a sentence that's very famous in Muslim circles in France, and is that the Muslims must have the right to be faithful, to live the faith, to transmit the faith to their children, and this at the same time they must be able to respect Republican law. And it's one of Sarkozy's favorite sentences.
Il suffit de transmettre en acte ces paroles-là aujourd'hui en France et dans les autres pays européens.
And this, if this sentence were implemented, it would ease the situation.
La deuxième chose, c'est très important, on en a parlé, l'enseignement du fait religieux à l'école. Aujourd'hui, c'est très important. Si nous voulons que juifs, chrétiens et musulmans puissent vivre ensemble, nous ne devons pas le faire quand ils atteignent 30 ans ou 40 ans, nous devons le faire à l'école, c'est-à-dire dans le collège quand ils ont 10, 12 ou 14 ans.
And what the administration must do as well is to teach religious and religious thought at school. And it's very important that this is made when people are very young, because it's not when they are like 40 years old that they will be able to understand religious facts.
Encourager le dialogue interreligieux, je pense que c'est très très important. Montrer que juifs, chrétiens.
Lastly, it's very important to encourage interreligious dialogue.
Nous devons apprendre à vivre justement, tranquillement et paisiblement ensemble.
So we must learn how to live peacefully and quietly together.
Thank you, Elodie. I want to thank you so much. We do not have the services of a professional translator here. What we have is an intern at the Woodrow Wilson Center who has very generously let herself be dragooned into doing some translation for us, and we thank you very much. Do any of the panelists want to comment on that, or shall we just go on to the next set of questions? Let's go on then. Let's take a couple at a time. Zahid, and then the lady over here, and we'll ask the panel to hold off answering until we've had both of those questions. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. I'm Zahid Nawaz from the United Kingdom, Senior Visiting Fellow for the Defence Academy. I had the honour of speaking yesterday, and I'm very grateful for the Woodrow Wilson Centre and to Philippa Strum for the invitation. Me and my colleagues from the UK will undoubtedly take back many experiences and practices, and we will seek to integrate those into our country. I think the question coming from our colleague from the Netherlands has actually hit the nail on the head. There's a wish list that we all can desire for, and the other is the ground realities. And the ground realities are that governments often have this quick response to situations, and unfortunately funding is seen as a quick fix, that if a community is making too many noises, let's give them a pot of funding and they will stay quiet. The experience from the United Kingdom, as you all may know, in the summer 2000 we had community riots and community disturbances, and a number of investigations were carried out, and the causes were that people were living polarized lives, no interaction, and funding was seen as a source of conflict rather than the solution, because funding pitches one community against the other. And as Sajida said, that there's a competitive process where you have to bid in for funding. So the white community will say, well, all the funding seems to go to the Muslim community. And the Sikh community will say, well, all the funding is going to the Muslim community and not to us. And this is the point which the racist far right in the United Kingdom, known as the British National Party, exploit during election times. And they come out with nonsense, such as asylum seekers get free cars and free televisions and get their meals cooked and so on. So I think we have to face the ground realities and ask fundamental burning questions, such as, is multiculturalism really working in European countries? Are we sleepwalking into segregation? And the other final point, this assumption which exists in the West and in the European countries, that alienation equals extremism. I've said this yesterday and I repeat it, colleagues, today, that we have to come out of this theory that alienation equals extremism. We have a new wave of extremists who are not alienated, who are professional people. Yeah. The Glasgow attacks in my country, in the United Kingdom, demonstrate that these were medics, doctors. How high can you get than a doctor other than the President of the United States? But it's considered as a very high profession. And these were doctors engaging in terrorist activity. There is something else, a brainwashing process taking place, an ideological battle. And I think the battle now is not between Islam and the West, it's between us and the extremists.
Akatsia, over here, please.
My name is Melise Touche, and I'm a student at UCLA. Actually, I'm here from California. And I wanted to ask a question about, it kind of relates to multiculturalism. There have been a lot of arguments that excessive multiculturalism has allowed for the rise of parallel communities. And I'm not talking as extreme as Ms. Seyran or Ms. Atesh, as you might know, that it's just so extreme that we have these crazy parallel communities. But there has been sort of almost a division between those who feel that they have managed to integrate themselves, not assimilate, but integrate themselves into these communities, immigrants, and those who cut themselves off, as you say, ghettoization, where they sort of create these separate communities. There has been a lot of focus on Muslim identity as a religious organization, and that's something that the DIK did in Germany. And I was wondering how you feel that your governments or your organizations are reaching out to these communities that are Muslim, but don't necessarily identify on a religious basis. They see their Muslim identity as a cultural one, or as one that arises, from where their parents or grandparents came from. Do you see anything addressing that? Do you see the government's making any movements to address that? Because there has been a lot of focus on faith, especially in the media, and Islamicification of, issues that are unrelated. But a lot of these groups, a vast majority, I would argue, do not see religion as the central identification of themselves, and I feel that they're excluded.
Thank you. Would you like to? The question essentially is, excuse me, are the governmental entities reaching out to Muslims who identify themselves as cultural Muslims rather than who want to be identified on the basis of faith or who are necessarily practicing? I mean, you really raised the question of how does the government identify the people to whom it wants to reach out?
Yeah, with DIK, for example.
I think we also Bernard speak about this issue because the Islam conference is constituted about 15 people from authorities from different levels and 15 people from the Muslim community. And from the 15 Muslims are 6 from organizations and 9 individuals. And one argument for this was that the authorities or the Federal Minister of Interior said the 6 organizations only represent about 20% of the 3 million Muslims in Germany. And so we need some representatives which represent the other people which are not represented in the organizations. But how Bernard said, if you make such a step, that means that you also try to represent people which don't see themselves as religious. If they were religious, they have a connection to a mosque, and that is problematical. But in Germany, we have figures that they show that about 20% are organized in a mosque, but even the people who are not organized in a mosque have a relation to a mosque. So about 50% of the Muslims in Germany have a connection to a mosque. For example, if I don't go pray in a mosque, but when my father or somebody from my family die, I need some religious help to bestatten, to bury this family member. So even not all are organized in a mosque. About 50%, the half of the Muslims, have a connection to a mosque. So our argumentation was to say why the government only speak with those 20% who have religious interests. And it's not rational why they try to represent people in this conference which have no religious interests. But this is indeed, but I think the government understands this issue. And when now the conference is about 3 years, and they try to work out some recommendations for the federal state level, how there can be a regular cooperation between Muslim organizations and the federal state. And I think when we come to the federal state level, there will be only the cooperation between the 20% which are organized in Muslim organizations and the state. And the 18% will not be represented in the future in this process.
Bernard, do you want to say, or did you want to?
That's okay, I agree with you.
I'm sorry that we've just about run out of time. I know there are more questions out there, and perhaps the panelists will make themselves available for a few moments after we break formally. We've raised an incredible number of issues this morning, and I think perhaps they should become the basis for future discussions. Just to summarize a very few of them, this is not an exhaustive list. The one we were talking about most recently, which was with whom does a government talk? With whom or with what does a government talk, and how does it identify the people and the organizations with which it should be communicating? There is the question of the westernization, if you will, or the nationalization of Islam, the extent to which there is developing a French Islam, a German Islam, an American Islam, an English Islam, and what the implications are of that. There was talk about the importance of the younger generation with a couple of directions following from that. One, that the younger generations may well be far better integrated than their parents and their grandparents, and that creates one particular reality, but also the fact that the younger generation may feel somewhat alienated, or some members of it may feel somewhat alienated, and that can hold a threat, not a promise. We've heard about the tension between national policies and local policies and the differences that are faced by national governments and more local governments. And I think while we didn't follow up on this, it was implicit in what Sue Greenwald said about the referendum, the resolution adopted in Davis against certain provisions of the Patriot Act. So you have a local government feeling that something that the federal government has done may not be helpful in its dealing with its Muslim populations or other populations. And finally, we've heard about the role of NGOs as an integrative mechanism, and the very important role that not only faith-based NGOs, but NGOs that bring together many, many people can play. So as I say, we have barely begun to scratch the surface of this conversation, and we hope that the conversation will continue in the future and that many of you will agree to participate in it with us. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, and will you join me in thanking our panelists?
Thank you. Yes, it was very difficult because you can speak of it during hours.
Yeah. And I wish we had more hours.
The story you said.